Right. Call this meeting of the Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation to order. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Adcox? Ms. Anderson? Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Kraus?
Here.
Dr. Gray? Mr. Hughes? Dr. Lane? Mr. MacArthur?
Here.
Ms. McGinnis? Dr. Mazzara? Dr. Presnell?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Ms. Lemming? Hauser?
Here.
Morelli? Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? All right.
Roll call for that. Okay. Dr. Adcox? Ms. Anderson? Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kraus?
Aye.
Dr. Gray is not here. Mr. Hughes is not here. Dr. Lane? Mr. MacArthur?
Aye.
Ms. McGinnis? Dr. Mazzara?
Here.
Dr. Presnell?
Aye.
Mr. Turner? Ms. Lemming?
Aye.
Ms. Hauser?
Aye.
Mr. Smurelli? And Mr. Wilson?
10 ayes.
10 ayes.
Okay, the agenda is approved. Next, we have the approval of the minutes of the April 29th meeting. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second. Dr. Adcox? Ms. Anderson? Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kraus?
Aye.
Dr. Gray? Mr. Hughes? Dr. Lane? Mr. MacArthur?
Aye. McGinnis is here.
I'm sorry.
Ms. McGinnis is here.
Ms. Dennis is here? Okay, great.
Thanks for working.
Dr. Mazzara?
Aye.
Dr. Presnell?
Aye.
Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Ms. Lemming?
Aye.
Ms. Hauser?
Aye.
Mr. Smurelli? And Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
Approved.
Thank you. Next is the chairman's report, and I will promise to be very brief, or you all probably won't let me chair another meeting of this group. It's a privilege for me to represent Governor Haslam on this board, and I very much look forward to working with each of you. There's no doubt that the role of financial aid in Tennessee has, well, it is central to the state's goal of meeting our drive to 55. And that's highlighted, of course, by the Tennessee Promise, but also the Tennessee Reconnect and the Tennessee Student Assistance Award Fund. So clearly there have been consistent investments by this administration, by the General Assembly, and that only serves to increase the importance of this board and the Student Assistance Corporation. So I know that the governor is very appreciative of your service on this board, and again, I very much look forward to working with you all. And lastly, I want to thank the staff for the tremendous work that it does, putting together the materials for this meeting, but also, more importantly, the work that it does for our students every day to help navigate this financial aid path and allow them to focus on their education. So with that, I am going to turn this over to James Snyder, and James is going to give us an update on the Tennessee Promise. And when I was commending the staff, I do want to point out the tremendous work that James has done with the Tennessee Promise as the Tennessee Promise coordinator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kraus, members of the board, for the opportunity to come and speak to you all this morning. I want to bring a brief update on the program from a year one perspective review, looking into year two, and then briefly looking forward from a financial perspective at investments, expenditures, and so on and so forth. So results from year one, I think we've really looked at these in a number of ways, from commission reports from prior board meetings. So fall enrollment last fall broke down at 16,291. That's where we've been most comfortable looking at that number. It may have fluctuated one or two up or down just very slightly, but that's the number that we're most comfortable with. Fall to spring retention of eligibility, and that's a key. I know from a THEC, from some of the commission reports that we've looked at, numbers are a little differently from retention within college. But from a retention of eligibility perspective, specific to TN Promise, what we've looked at was 10,917 students is the best estimate of students that retained TN Promise eligibility from fall to spring. And then looking at fall to fall, the best estimate that we have to date, and this is a strict estimate in that this number represents those who submitted their community service for the fall of 2016, so 7,821. That number is still pending fall certification of eligibility, which would be determined by enrollment, continued enrollment, the grade point average, so satisfactory academic progress, those types of things. But that number, and this is representative of only that first cohort of students, so it's important to look at that as well and not factor in numbers that we'll look at in just a few minutes as well. So total cost of year one is just over $15 million to $15,221,522. The average award per student at roughly $934. Okay, yes, sir.
And so just on that retention number, we understand that the endpoint for Tennessee Promise success isn't necessarily the retention of the Tennessee Promise award. The endpoint for Tennessee Promise success is continued enrollment in college. And I think a significant number of these students were full Pell because Tennessee Promise brought them to the table and then quickly ascertained that they didn't necessarily need to keep Promise to keep full Pell. We don't know. We've heard the THEC research team, along with James, will be helping to answer that question. But I see a very positive number. It's higher than I thought it would be because these are students that have elected to remain full once they've done all the requirements. The 16,291 in about 2 or 3 weeks and seeing how many of the 16,291 are still in college. And that's really higher than 78,21, certainly. Say that 7821 runs fairly closely to what a community college retention rate would look like year to year at any rate. But I think this gives us the chance to be higher. Does that make sense? An important caveat, because I think when people see that, they say, oh, wow, so there's been a big drop-off. There maybe has been a drop-off in students who have elected not to remain in Tennessee Promise, but it's their retention in college that we're really watching.
Just to further that, roughly 49% were in the full Pell to Pell combined with Hope covering portion. So that would be the students, as Mike alluded to, that really weren't utilizing from a financial perspective the TN Promise program. And so they may have recognized that and chose to no longer participate, just recognizing that strictly from a financial perspective, this was no longer necessary. It was, and I've used this anecdote in the past, this was their insurance plan. They no longer needed their insurance plan because they recognized they had Pell, they had Hope, they had TSAA, and so this was no longer necessary. So that may represent a piece of the drop of participation there as well.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are you or will you be tracking how they're doing academically?
Yes. So within our certifications, we're looking from a TSAC perspective, we do require the 2.0 grade point average at the end of the academic year, and so they'll be reporting that to us. Then from, and I may have to defer to Emily House, I believe from a THEC's research perspective, that will be something that they will be tracking semester by semester. And
I would be curious to see how well they're doing above the 2.0. That's the base requirement, but academically speaking.
And they came in at the end of last year. I think we saw a number that was pretty commensurate, right?
It was. It was not substantially or significantly different than.
Which is like a high 2.8, 2.9 range. Absolutely. Okay. And we will get specifically into the money, by the way, later in the presentation, because that bears its own discussion.
Are we doing anything on the qualitative side? I mean, obviously, the goal of this was to get people into college who are not normally going to go. And so I think I think it's important if we can begin to unpack that. And I don't know if we're doing any type of a survey that, it'd be also interesting to note if it changed their enrollment plans. You know, were they planning on going to a 4-year, but they went to a 2-year? Were they going to go to a 2-year anyway? Were they not thinking about college at all, but now this made the difference? And I think all of those are pretty important questions.
So two things. We did have a sample of students from the Bridge program that we did a qualitative survey on, and I do not remember the statistics other than they were significant. Wasn't going to college, but now I am. I'll also tell you the Bridge students are probably not a great representative. There's a little skewing there because these are self-selecting, highly motivated students that maybe haven't performed well academically. But the larger answer is we need an evaluation. And much as we've had now several times, I think, with the lottery and even the outcomes-based funding formula at TSAC, at some point, somebody that isn't in state has to help us tell that story. And I think that between year 2 and year 3 is a good time to start that. Qualitative has to be a piece of it for sure, though.
Looking at not necessarily year 1 results, more so beyond the year 1 results, looking at cohort 2 and then on into cohort 3, so doing some projections. So we're estimating from so looking at an estimation of cohort 2, the entering freshmen in college, we're still estimating the roughly 16 to 17,000 to move on or to flow in to align with the results from cohort 1. So if we were to combine that 16,000 to 17,000 with the roughly 7,500 or 7,800 from that first cohort of students, the estimate on that, the total cost would be roughly $26.5 million for the year. Their next deadline will be the community service submission for December 1st. And just in a moment, we'll look at a projection of cohort 2 from start to finish. I do have that projection on the next slide. And then looking at cohort 3, adding in, and this will bring us to full maturity of the program, roughly 60,000 applicants that would have somewhere in the neighborhood of 35,000 students, projected cost in the neighborhood of $33 million. And so we'll look at, and that's at full maturity with 3 cohorts of students. First cohort moving on to graduation and completion, second and third cohorts currently are fully enrolled and enrolled in the program. That application opened on August 1st. We currently have just over 26,000 applicants in the pipeline for the program. So looking at preliminary year 2 results, the application closed on November 2nd. We had 59,000 applicants. From a public and private school perspective, it's roughly 80%, I believe, of the applicants from across the state of Tennessee, public and private school students. So the fervor, the buzz around Tennessee Promise is still present. We're obviously looking at that as we look year over year at a waterfall of applicants around the state. We're still neck and neck last year, and even we then compare just the same to cohort 1. So the fervor, even with year 3, is still present. First mandatory meeting, we had 51,000 students, and then the FAFSA completion deadline with a 1-week extension due to weather last year. If you'll recall, we had just shy of 49,000 students meet that deadline. And then the second mandatory meeting, 32,000 roughly, nearly 33. Then the community service, when we got to that on August 1st, that's actually about a 6% increase year over year when we look at the full cohort for Teen Achieves, Ready, and AIRS as a population. Last year we were at roughly 22.5, with us being at 23.7 this year. So that's a substantial increase in submissions of the community service. And we still do not anticipate that we will see 23,000 students enrolling in the institutions, in eligible institutions this fall. That would represent students that have taken this insurance plan all the way to its full fruition, and then they choose not to enroll because they got a substantial scholarship offer at another institution. That we are anticipating that and fully expecting it. We are looking at fall 2016 enrollment. Certification is currently ongoing. I've had 2 of our TBR institutions that have certified, so we really don't have a clear enough picture to talk about eligibility from a results, if you will, from a fall 16 perspective just yet. So we're looking at yes, ma'am.
One of the concerns early on was having a substantial amount of mentors for the community program. So where are you as far as in that? Because it's one thing to have the students, but if you don't have the mentors, that's what I'm calling them, in the community service, then you've got a problem. So how are we doing about that?
TN Achieves has been very aggressive in their recruitment of mentors, and they really have not seen any issues to date. Part of what we did with some rule enhancements last, I think it was 2 board meetings ago, was to and it was actually, I don't know that it was a rule enhancement, but basically shifting the way the mentors were utilized and assigning mentors at the second mandatory meeting rather than the first. So we filtered out some of the students who really had no plans on utilizing the program. Those were most of those students from the 51 to 32, that group of students, especially from the 59,000 to the 51, that group, they were basically in a high school classroom, or and their school counselor or their teacher said, you are going to do the application. I don't care what your plans are. You may be going to Harvard, that in your head, and that student may very well be going to Harvard, but you're doing the TN Promise application because our initiative at our school is 100% completion. We're seeing it. I've worked firsthand doing it 2 years ago when I was in outreach, and it's still present in some of the schools. And so that's part of the shift with Achieves assigning mentors at the second meeting, so we're really filtering out most of those that really have very little intention of using. So that takes away the concern of, or that issue, if you will.
In a given year, we need about 8,000 to 9,000 mentors. Yeah. And they've hit that target both years. And it's also important to note that in 11 of our counties, there's not a mentorship based program with volunteers. There's a trained mentor in the schools, primarily in West Tennessee between the Ayers Foundation and Ready. But in the 84 Achieves counties, they've hit their targets. They work really hard at it. A lot of people in this room are mentors, which I always think is pretty cool when these students don't even know what they're in for when they find out their mentor works at TSAC. They definitely get good financial aid info.
All right, so this is probably the most in the weeds, if you will, slide, but I know we wanted to look at revenue versus expenditures versus surplus. I don't necessarily want to read numbers to you. I will be happy to, but knowing that we are in a very good place from an investments perspective. We had results on investments on last year. We were far above the expected, the projections. We project investment results in the 4% range. I believe we were at roughly 5.5% for the year, the latest results. So we were in a very good place from an investments perspective as we look at this. Revenue on 15-16 was a little over $45 million. Expenditures at 15, leaving us a surplus of 30. On the 16-17 with projected expenditures of the 26.5, and then surplus would be roughly 50 with a balance forward of 96. So our surplus is growing as we move forward. And then at full maturity, we would still have, based on current projections and current investment rates, a $19 million surplus.
The revenue, does the revenue include the corpus?
That top line number is two things: what we made in the market on the corpus investment, and then what we made from the net lottery proceeds that were rolled over after we paid all the lottery's bills. Which
so the corpus isn't even shown here.
No.
So when we're talking about a balance forward, that would go. You're going to put that into the corpus.
That goes back into the. Does it go to the operating fund of the corpus?
Well, it doesn't go into the corpus. It just goes into
Just as a balance forward.
Yeah.
that goes forward. It doesn't get put back into the original 460.
Because once it's in there, it wouldn't be able to be accessed.
Right.
What is the target?
It's spendable.
We're significantly ahead. So what we would have hoped to have done this year, I'm thinking back to old budget sheets, Tim, Pete, and Russ, but we would have hoped to carry forward about $30 million this year. We carried forward 46. And then what's really impressive, though, is if you look at year 3, so 17 to 18, that's when this program is at full actualization. We have the tail end of cohort 1 maybe doing a 5th semester, hopefully not, but they're able to. We have cohort 2 in their sophomore year, then we have cohort 3 in their freshman year. So that means out the door, this program ends up being about $33 million, which are numbers we feel really good about now, because we've seen what a cohort costs. It costs about $15.2 million. to see in year 3 that we're still running a $19 million surplus is pretty impressive. And I'll also say, when we do these, we do a most conservative possible estimate. And we've actually ratcheted down some of our estimates to be extra conservative. That top number, that $45 million, was a large function of the net lottery proceeds, and we had a great year in the lottery due to the Powerball and some of the games that went on last February specifically.
Always good to be in the black instead of in the red.
So 2 points, and especially for the board. One, this is what you would want in the early years of an endowment, and it's what we had hoped to get. And when you roll out a new initiative, you have a lot of hope, but you kind of have to wait and see how it materializes. It materialized and then some. But the second point is this: I still think it requires vigilance and protection of the program. As you would imagine, when people see these numbers in certain quarters, they immediately begin thinking of other things to do with Tennessee Promise. And I believe that is ill-advised right now, and we will continue, with the board's consent, to maintain that position throughout this legislative session, because the reality is, until we're in 17, 18, and honestly, I would say maybe a year or two past, it's probably not great to begin nickel and diming the Promise Fund to have Promise do other things. And last session, nobody came to us with bad ideas for Promise, by the way. They were all great ideas. But touching an endowment in its first year of operation doesn't seem like the best course of action. And these numbers are great news, but they also present a little bit of a challenge, because when people see that, they start thinking, oh, let's start stretching our legs a little bit on Promise. I don't think we are there yet. Chairman, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement.
I would just say, though, that if your expenditures are even, say, 35 million, and you're going to have a balance forward of 115 after your expenditures are paid, we need to be thinking about this a little bit.
I agree.
Because one, and that's, I totally agree. You shouldn't, let's be really careful about this, and let's run it out. And the legislature, as much as we absolutely love them because they appropriate for us, but they're going to get, I think you're right, they're going to get a little antsy on it. So I think that there ought to be some discussion, at least among ourselves, as to what our priorities are in terms of the overall funding mechanism. And, for instance, and I know we're going to get into this later, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, maybe we could do it a little bit later when we get to the reports, but I think that probably 4-year institutions would like to see a right sizing of the lottery piece again. So, you've got the sweep going on, right? Excess lottery funds go here. How much longer should they go there? What does the corpus need to be? And, granted, this is not, this keeps them in play, the 115 million, and I know we're down the road here, but the 115 million stays in play, but how much of it needs to stay in play versus how much goes into the corpus, which then guarantees you on your revenue side. But so I'm thinking that we need to be thinking about it. I'd much rather us be thinking about it before the legislature reacts to it, because we'll be reflective and think about it, and they're going to react more to numbers they see. And so maybe some early discussions, it would be helpful to just kind of figure out how we want to prioritize, if this, then that.
I agree, and especially if we see this falls, if our award stays at $900 range, meaning it's a pretty stable number for us to count on, I think that could fuel some of those discussions too.
And you need to wait until 3 years out on that piece,
right,
for sure.
But there's some proactivity to your point.
Yeah.
I
So,
agree.
and yeah, maybe we just kind of put up some scenarios or discuss some scenarios might be helpful.
Are there any other questions, comments? Again, thank you all for the opportunity to address the board.
All right, thank you, James. Next, we have the Executive Director's Report. Mike?
Thank you. I will be really brief. I am incredibly honored to be sitting at this table, my first meeting, being able to be part of the TSAC team. I've been in the job now 7 weeks, punctuated 4 weeks in with a new baby. So it's been a crazy 7 weeks. My two favorite parts about the last 7 weeks I will share are, one, really getting to meet our team at TSAC. So you'll see here, and our new logo and branding. There's something going on here about these two agencies. THEC and TSAC, really part of what we're trying to be is a really more seamless agency. There are a lot of ways that THEC and TSAC are seamless right now. We're trying to further that because when you look at the state's higher education agenda and the Drive to 55, it kind of requires it. So that's the first nuance I would throw out. I would also say this logo was designed at no cost by Kate Derrick in-house. As state logos go, it was decidedly cheap. You'll also see just a very simple statement about what we are about, our core vision. That everything we do here, no matter what you do at TSAC, is about increasing the number of Tennesseans with a college degree, which ultimately means it's about students. The coolest thing to see over the last 6 weeks is what I already knew to be true, and that is the team here at TSAC is already there. This is a student-focused group of people. Every day, go to the call center and listen to the calls. They are talking to people and parents and students every day. Go Darylyn and her team, when they go out to campuses, they are making sure campuses can administer financial aid. So I've been so incredibly impressed by the team here. I'm proud to be a part of it. What I'd ask of the board over the next several months, one, we're going to have to continue to have discussions about financial aid for adults. And I think that how we serve adult students really needs to be central. And this, again, is where THEC and TSAC can be so closely linked with the THEC Adult Learner Unit that Jessica Gibson leads, but then also the Grants and Scholarships Division that Tim Phelps leads. So I look forward to updating you all on that. I'm profoundly grateful to be able to serve in this role. One of the things that's happened since I've been here the last 6 weeks, in fact, the first Saturday I worked here, is something that I know we drag you all into the weeds at these meetings, but I'm going to drag you really far down for a moment because it's important. As you know, financial aid data system, eGrants, that we've been operating for several years with an external vendor located in a state that egregiously is not part of the SEC. So we knew we needed to immediately correct that. But our external vendor that provided this financial aid data system did fine, but it was identified that we were going to need to bring that in-house at some point. And this is a long-range goal. You all have been hearing about as a board now for a year or years. It is in-house, and Tim Phelps is going to bring the update. But I'll tell you, my first Saturday here, I came by just to poke in on the TSAC staff who had been working all day Saturday, then worked all day Sunday. And the reason they did it was because we now have an internal data system, which I know that it's hard to make that into a newspaper headline, but it's a really big deal for a state agency to kind of commandeer something that's been run by a vendor and say, no, we're now going to run this internally. It's going to allow us to be more responsive to students. And that's exactly what happened. So Tim is going to come and give us an update about it. I'll say there was no shortage of donuts that Saturday morning. We had the same idea, and there were at least 6 donuts here. And so I can give a good donut report. So you give the rest.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mike, members of the board. So just a brief update. Like Mike mentioned, the eGrant system is a system that we use to administer all of our grant and scholarship programs. And we purchased that system last summer, and we've been working with NGS, the outside vendor, to transition the system to our control. And so we did move the system in-house the second week of August, and we successfully took control. I do have to mention the staff members that were here. They gave up a Saturday to make sure we had a smooth transition, but Robert Biggers, Leah Lou Allen, James Snyder, James Hawkins, Mary Van Valkenburg, Me Jones, Brian Page, Ed Civils, and Deepraj Vernacker all sacrificed a Saturday to come in, like I said, and made sure that it was a smooth transition with no interruption in service to students, parents, the institutions as well. So that definitely has been a success. But on top of that, we still have work to do to maintain and enhance the system. NGS will continue to essentially serve on an as-needed basis with TSAC through the end of the year. After December 31st, then essentially the ball is fully in our court and we'll be responsible. Really, we've had a couple of minor issues that we faced, and we've handled those with no problem. So it's definitely been a good transition thus far, and James Hawkins, to his credit, has hired a great staff, those that I mentioned previously. So it's been going very well, and we expect it to continue to go well. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have about that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I've shared this with a few staff members when I came here from Kentucky about 10 years ago. We had our own internal IT staff, and it was essentially if I had something that I wanted to change to the system, I could literally call a programmer and say, hey, I need you in my office. So to have that type of flexibility that we have now is tremendous. And there's nothing that, and all credit to NGS, working with them, we had a very good relationship, but there's nothing like having someone face to face and meeting with that person and saying, this is exactly what I want. So in doing that, we have a great team that's assembled and look forward to, like I said, maintaining and
I believe that Dr. Katie Hyatt from the University of Tennessee has joined us via phone. Is that correct? Thank you. Welcome. Next, we have the President's Report, the TSAC President's Report. Turn it over to Karen Hauser.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today, and I do recognize and appreciate the executive, the board, TSAC board, for having this position on the board as I represent the members of the student financial aid community that are out in our institutions, as well as the students that we serve. I did pass out a brief report here for you. Knowing, for those who aren't familiar with TASFA, the Tennessee Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, we align our service to our members who are serving the students of Tennessee through effective policy procedures, training, and the delivery of financial aid to our students. I'd like to share with you just 4 of the goals that we've set out for the year. These 4 are taken from our long-range strategic plan. The first being, of course, to continue training the professionals in our state who do serve the students. And we'd like to recognize and appreciate the support we receive continually from TSAC, working with their team on training materials, hosting workshops in collaboration with us. Second, I'd like to point out that one of the things we have to do as a board is evaluate the positions on the board, because each position in a volunteer organization costs money. And so part of our long-range plan is determine, are all these standing committee chairs necessary? And one of those we want to evaluate is the TSAC Advisory Committee to TSAC. We do recognize that TSAC members are collaborating with TSAC and in joint issues on developing procedures, working on legislative issues, but our membership doesn't always know that that's going on, because often it's a high-level institutional representative. In the past, this was an active committee in TASFA with TSAC, but TSAC and THEC are transitioning. So one of the things we'd like to do this year is our past president, who is the committee chair, Dick Smelser sent Mike Krause a letter just asking for a conversation to be had so that we can determine, do we need to renew this committee? Does the committee need to change, or do we need to eliminate the committee? Fill it with another valuable position maybe at the TASFA level. Our third thing that we'd like to recognize is the support of the financial aid outreach efforts that TSAC's doing. And TASFA needs to do a better job working together with TSAC in those outreach opportunities. We individually have opportunities going on our campus for FAFSA completion. TSAC independently is doing many wonderful things with FAFSA completion, FAFSA frenzy that I know we're going to hear about, but we want to be able to do it together. So one of the initial things that we've done is worked with Darylyn and Jason C. and come up with, within our TASFA membership, identifiers, who within our organization would be willing to step into a community and give presentations, either for TSAC, on behalf of TSAC, or with TSAC, and again, sharing materials. So we're looking at enhancing that relationship as well. And then the fourth thing that I've set for a goal this year is to make our first official TASFA Hill visit to the state of Tennessee, the capital. SASFA and NASFA both advocate regularly and furiously out on the Federal Hill and do a very good job, and I've had the privilege to do that. And it is an education to go sit in offices with legislatures. And many of our board members have never done that. they've never even been to the state capitol. So I look forward this year to just initiating our first Hill visit sometime in February, just making a presence, just getting ourselves out there so that they in turn know who we are and can call us, or with your help, we can work together on passing those bills. The end of my report shows who the board is made up of this year. I've tried to select a very diverse board, including all the institutions that are within our state. You can see that 10 independent 4-year aid administrators are on our board, 1 2-year independent aid administrator. We've got 5 4-year and 5 2-year public aid administrators. TCAT is represented on our board, as well as 3 members from TSAC, and I appreciate their willingness to serve on the board. And then we have 2 representing other organizations. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for your partnership. Any questions for Karen?
Comment? February, since you've talked about going to the Capitol, perhaps as part of the agenda would be a good opportunity for those members to also interface with the TSAC board members. Executive Director Krause, and I know February is a busy time, but I think it would be good too for them to put a face with a name, people because we're in this together, an opportunity for that too. So just as a thought.
No, I think that, and that's something we're thinking through for both TSAC and THAC and any board member. Let's get you a structure for that, certainly, Carrie. And I think
Reception or something.
education committees, those members, especially the ones that have been long-serving, they're pretty in the weeds on higher education things. And so I think, one, hearing from your constituency, certainly hearing from the TSAC board would be helpful. I'll volunteer Claude to lead that expedition, given the fact he's already rooted in the plaza. But no, we'll work on that. Thank you. And please convey to TASFA and Dick, receive the letter, and we will welcome that conversation. And TASFA has been an incredible partner, and we look forward to continuing that in whatever permutation.
Okay, we have 6 decision items. First on that list is the adoption of the rules for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. Turn it back over to Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Krause, members of the board. Under tab 1A, you should have the amended rules for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. I will mention that TSAC has worked with the colleges and universities in amending these rules, and there should be a summary sheet in front of the proposed rules. And I'll briefly highlight just a couple of those changes. So the first change is that we eliminated the August 1 verification deadline. And for those that may not be familiar, verification is a process. About a third of students get selected for that process. They're required to provide essentially verification of the information that was reported on the FAFSA. And so that has been really one of the biggest obstacles that students and parents have faced in maintaining eligibility. Students will still be required to complete the verification process, but documentation will just not be required to be submitted by the August 1 that has been so in the past. We worked closely with the community colleges financial aid directors as well, and this was definitely unanimously applauded and recommended by those financial aid directors. So I think that's a very important step and very important change that we're making for the students. Next, we moved the community service deadline for the summer from May 1 to April 1 to accommodate the TCAT or the Tennessee College of Applied Technology term start dates. Some TCAT students will be starting in April, so this allows the TCAT's time to ensure the students are eligible for Promise once they begin the term. Next, we clarified the rules so that the community service deadline applies to all students, not just entering freshmen. It made sense to us to align the community service schedule to one date for all students rather than having 2 separate dates. So. Next, we removed mandatory from the first meeting or made the first meeting to allow Tennessee Achieves to use assembly-style meetings during the school day at the high schools for the students. So given the amount of time allotted that those students, the Tennessee Achieves would have for that type of meeting, it would be difficult to take attendance. The other partnering organizations can essentially continue business as usual, which they typically take a one-on-one approach with their students. And additionally, the second meeting would continue to be a mandatory meeting. The next, we remove the transfer requirement from the rule to allow students who transfer to remain eligible for promise, even if they're unable to complete the program of study before they reach a terminating event. Essentially, we did this to allow students to still continue to get closer to earning a credential or degree without being cut off at the knees and losing eligibility for Tennessee Promise. We adjusted the FAFSA application deadline date to allow TSAC to determine that on an annual basis rather than leaving a fixed date in the rules, something that may need to be updated each year. And this will be a date that we establish each year with our institutions, with the partnering organizations, and make sure that it's a reasonable deadline for everyone. And finally, we eliminated the Tennessee Promise renewal application. In theory, this was an idea that we had to help determine who maintained interest in returning for the second year, but it's really proved to be more of a barrier. So we just felt the need to eliminate it. And that's a summary of the changes. Recommend passage of the rules and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I would just say to the board, I think what you see here is we're continuing to learn with implementation of a very large and massive program. But every rule change here actually goes back to students and making sure that their pathway is easier. Applaud Tim and his team and James, because I think sometimes government gets a bad rap for not being nimble, and I would say that is not the case here. We're trying to adapt every year and make sure the program is more accessible. These rule changes are very needed, and our hope is every board meeting we won't continue to bring you promise changes, but we're learning, and this puts us in a much better place than we are without them.
Mike or Tim, quick question. Assuming this passes today, how quickly would this information be disseminated out to all the stakeholders?
Once they become effective, then we would absolutely disseminate that. And I think most of the, like I said, 85% of recipients are at the community colleges, and we've collaborated with the community college financial aid directors. So James would be able to put this out as soon as it's effective.
I need a motion for approval.
Make a motion that we approve these rule changes as they've been submitted.
Okay.
All right, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Dr. Adcox? Ms. Anderson? Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kraus?
Aye.
Dr. Gray? Mr. Hughes? Dr. High? Mr. MacArthur?
Aye.
Ms. McGinnis?
Aye.
Dr. Mazzara?
Aye.
Dr. Presnell? Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Dr. Lemming?
Aye.
Ms. Hauser?
Aye.
Mr. Smarelli? Mr. Wilson? Your rules have passed.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the adoption of the rules for the Ned McWhirter Scholars Program. Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under tab 1B, you'll find the amended rules and also a summary of the changes as well. And just for those that aren't familiar with the Ned McWhirter Scholars Program, the recipients of this award are really the cream of the crop. The recipients have a 34 average ACT and a GPA of 3.98, 3.99. So these are truly outstanding students. But we've modified the rules to more align with the Hope Scholarship, and a couple of examples of that. Allowing students to enroll within 16 months, the Hope Scholarship gives them that option. So we essentially included that in these rules. Providing a regain provision if the student loses the award. So we haven't had a tremendous number of students who have lost the award just because these students are so academically well prepared. But over the last 5 years, we've had about 17 students, and with that regain provision, essentially we would have had about a third of those students, we think, be able to regain the award. We also included language which prohibits the institutions from including a work requirement in the matching funds. And then we also lowered the renewal GPA to 3.0 at the end of each academic year, which really just simplifies the renewal requirements. And that's a summary of the changes. Recommend passage and be happy to answer any questions.
Was there a problem with some institutions requiring work? for this? I wasn't aware of that.
We had some institutions initially had a work requirement and they had phased it out, but we had one institution that still had a work requirement.
Very good. I'm definitely in favor of that. I might mention too, for those not familiar with it, that this is a matching program. So the institutions have to match it dollar for dollar. So it's a tremendous investment of these dollars to the institutions because it's doubled once it gets to the campus.
Just a quick question. So how many on average students receive this, like on average?
Typically, we've had about 50 new recipients a year, so a cohort of 200. We have been able to get funds appropriated for the past few years. So this year, we were actually able to more than double that. So,
Worth noting, there's unmet needs still among a really high achieving group of students that have worked really hard. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's worth, I think, discussing as a board some recommendations for more investment in this program.
And to give the board an idea, so in 16-17, we had about 1,200 applicants for the program. So to allude to what Mike said, definitely a lot of unmet need in this program.
Move.
Have a second? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Dr. Adcox. Ms. Anderson. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Kraus.
Aye.
Dr. Gray. Mr. Hughes. Dr. High. Mr. MacArthur. Ms. McGinnis.
Aye.
Dr. Mazzara.
Aye.
Dr. Presnell. Mr. Turner. Dr. Lemming.
Aye.
Ms. Hauser.
Aye.
Mr. Smorelli. Mr. Wilson.
Aye.
Your rules have passed.
May I add my vote?
Yes.
I'm Sharon. Hey.
You do.
Ayes.
Sorry about that, Sharon. Tim, we'll stick with you. TSAA overcommitment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under tab 1C, you'll find the information on the TSA overcommitment ratio for 2017-18. There is a chart on the second page which shows the actual expenditures for the current year, for the last 5 years, and then projected expenditures for this year and next year, and essentially the balance of the student loan program reserve. So we try to overcommit funds. We know that not all students are going to receive the award or qualify for the award when we make the overcommitment. Some will choose not to enroll or enroll less than half-time or enroll less than part-time rather and not receive the full award. So we know that if we overcommit, we are able to spend a certain amount of funds. If you look at the last 5 years of the overcommitment ratio, we've used an overcommitment of 153%. For the 15-16 academic year we just completed, we spent just over $80 million. We were able to do that because the board gives us the flexibility to make additional awards so we can fully spend the amount of appropriation that we have and then also the reserve as well. So for the 17-18, we're recommending that 153%. The second recommendation is to allot $1.3 million from the reserve to use to make awards, and right now the balance stands at about a little over $9 million. The board's desire has been to spend that down to a $4 to $5 million range. After the 16-17 academic year, we should be in the $5 to $5.5 million range for the reserve, and then appropriating another $1.3 million would get us down to about the $4 million. So in summary, 153% overcommitment ratio is recommended, $1.3 million from the reserve, and I'll be happy to answer
Questions?
Well, this is, back to your earlier comment, Mr. Chairman, this is a good visual of the administration's commitment to this program. You take a look at that chart that, you look at the total funding state appropriations, you look at 11-12, we were under 50 million, and now we're at 80 million. I'm sorry, that just makes my day. Because these are very, very low income students, and this type of program makes or breaks the ability to go to college. And so I think that's phenomenal. I know we still have a number of students that are not funded who do apply and are eligible for the program, but we're making significant progress and have made significant progress in the last few years. And so I think that's something to celebrate. And obviously, you know, we knew that the reserve transfer would it'll eventually be gone. And so the administration's commitment to continue to do that is really all the more important. I would move passage of the.
Second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Dr. Adcox.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Kraus.
Aye.
Dr. Gray. Mr. Hughes. Dr. High. Mr. MacArthur. Ms. McGinnis.
Aye.
Dr. Mazzara.
Aye.
Dr. Presnell.
Aye.
Mr. Turner. Dr. Lemming.
Aye.
Ms. Hauser.
Aye.
Mr. Smorelli. Mr. Wilson. Ms. Hayes.
Aye.
I think your ratio is passed.
Thank you. Next, we have the proposed budget request for 16-17. That's Peter Abernathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, in behind that tab is just a brief explanation of the budget recommendation. This is a recommendation to continue the current year's budget. So the base budget moving forward is what we're recommending to the Department of Finance Administration. They have asked for a 2% reduction on the state appropriations out of our administrative code, so it doesn't impact the grant and scholarship programs, but it does impact the by an amount of about 32 out of the administrative code. And that is just for potential reductions, as I understand. Is that right, or is that, yeah. So so that's to be considered along with the recommendation for the base budget moving forward. The one improvement or increase that we are asking for the board's consideration and approval today is a continuation of what we've done over the past 4 years with the TSAA program. So kind of to piggyback on what Mr. Phelps described in the TSAA program, we have a population of roughly 80,000 students who are eligible for the TSAA program, but because of budget limitations, we can't fund those students. So what we've done is we've set a goal to fund those over a 5-year period, and just simply dividing by 5 and multiplying by the number of students or the percent of students that actually accept the award that receive it or that are awarded. We get to about an $18 million, which represents about students. So the recommendation then, in addition to the base budget, is an $18.1 million increase for the TSAA program. Those extra 10,000 would bring the total number of awarded students to approximately 58,000, which is a sizable increase, and the administration has been gracious with these the last few years. Hopeful for similar treatment this year. That is our recommendation. On the last page that just goes through in detail the various divisions of TSAC and what is spent, what is estimated to be spent in the current fiscal year and what would be proposed in the next fiscal year. Be glad to answer any questions on the budget.
Questions or discussion?
So I'll just share, some insights because I'm learning this budget too. Obviously, at TSAC, we think of our budget 2 ways. One, our internal budget, how we pay the bills of this agency and have our staff and able to accomplish our mission. A big takeaway here is we've been asked to prepare for a 2% cut. We've been able to identify an area where we could deliver that, and it would be about $32,000. Just to provide some perspective, though, and just, I don't know that we do this a lot here, but talk about how many people are we talking about here at TSAC? We're talking between, depending on where we are in position, 64 to 65 staff members who every day are coming to work here at TSAC, and this is their agency. The other thing internally, though, that money supports, one, this is an agency with a pretty substantial fiscal footprint. When you put in lottery aid, we would be among the top in the state of any agency with a $500 million footprint when you put in lottery pass-through. So just a point to make, we always think of our budget first internal, which is that number. But then the second is really what Pete's just discussed, which is thinking about the larger higher ed policy universe of financial aid. And that reflects in our TSAA request. And then THEC, to again make this point about our agencies moving closer together, there are programmatic things that THEC administers that closely touch Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Reconnect in particular. So we'll be working through an iterative conversation with the administration, with FNA, about improvements to whether it's Tennessee Promise supports that we deliver via the Bridge program, or things we're doing for Tennessee Promise at colleges, the Forward Grant that allows colleges to put in place interventions, public and private. But I think the biggest takeaway here is we think in kind of a bifurcated way with the budget. How do we work internally? How are we thinking about serving students with the money? And I mean, in this case, the recommendation we're asking the board to endorse is one that really builds, and Claude, I promise we didn't put him up to that. It perfectly framed what we're hoping to do at TSAA. Hope that's helpful context.
Any further discussion? Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion, we approve the budget as it's been submitted.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Secretary, call the roll.
Dr. Adcox.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson. Mr. Smith.
Pass.
Mr. Kraus.
Aye.
Dr. Gray. Mr. Hughes. Dr. High. Mr. MacArthur.
Aye.
Ms. McGinnis. Dr. Mazzara.
Aye.
Dr. Presnell.
Aye.
Mr. Turner.
Pass.
Dr. Lemming.
Aye.
Ms. Hauser.
Aye.
Mr. Smorelli. Mr. Wilson. Ms. Hayes.
Aye.
Your budget has passed.
Thank you. Peter, we'll stay with you for the preliminary uses of the operating fund.
Okay. Thank you. For those who've been on the board for a while, you're very familiar with the discussion of the operating fund. For those for whom this is a new item, the federal loan program over the years has generated excess revenues that by federal statute are entitled to be used by the guarantee agencies. So our operating fund over the years had grown to roughly $80 million at one point, at the high point. We, under the board's approval, had transferred roughly $50 million to help create the initial endowment for the Tennessee Promise program. We've had some other expenditures that are allowable by the federal government, but we're now at a position, after having closed the federal loan program, of still having about roughly, currently about $22 million in the operating fund. That has been designated by the U.S. Department of Education to be property of TSAC, and according to the federal code, that money can be spent now on a variety of financial aid related functions, including default management, default aversion, training, outreach, financial literacy. And then the last thing it cites in that code is other financial aid related purposes as designated by the guarantee agency. So there's a fairly wide array of items that we can use these funds for. When we put this document together and sent it out to the board members, our thinking at the time was to propose some general guidelines for use of that $22 million moving forward. We have since had some discussions with the Department of Finance over the major item in that proposal, which was to transfer some $15 million of that to the McWhorter corpus to be used to generate additional funds for the McWhorter Scholars Program. So we're in discussions, as I said, with FNA about how exactly to do that. There may be some room for some appropriation increase from McWhorter, which would save us having from spending this money out of the operating fund that could then be used for other purposes. So this is still a bit in limbo. I will say on the second page, the pie chart, you'll notice a few of these items are I would say non-negotiable. We have to pay ECMC, which is the entity that took over the loan program. There's still some charges that we'll have to pay them. We have our own internal operating expenditures that we have to continue that are provided for under the old loan program. But for the most part, the rest of it is to be determined on how we best spend that. And so I think at this point, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation would not be to move forward with a vote on exactly how to spend this today. We would come back, though, I think, in our spring meeting with a specific plan. But at least at this point, to move forward with the expenditures as necessary and provided by the federal code, and then we'll have some clarification with the Department of Finance moving forward, and can come back to the board with.
Okay. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, I'm glad we're not voting on it, because I think it would have been a little premature at this meeting to do this. I'm very encouraged by the focus on the NEMIC water program, and that again would go into a corpus that produces revenue for scholarship awarding. So that's another one of those in perpetuity type strategies, I think, which is really good. I know that the default diversion piece, the student and school activity piece, is a new piece for us. And I just want to really reinforce the importance of that, especially for institutions that are kind of small to medium-sized institutions that don't have the resources that larger institutions may have to really put some energy around it. And there is so much press on the college costs, the student loan debt situation, and default issues. And to strengthen the higher education system and our and actually, honestly, our citizens over time, I think we need to continue to pay attention there. So one, I'm glad that we've created that division. I think that's a really logical outgrowth of the loan program. So I think that's really, really important. I'm a little concerned of the $2 million figure. I'm wondering if that's enough to venture fund that, to get that thing going. And in light of what we saw in the Tennessee Promise dollars and the rolling forward, I don't, $3 million is not much out of this, but if it is as healthy as it appears it's going to be, we might not want to consider holding back a little bit for those services to those campuses that we can really work on the student loan piece. So I think it's good we're not voting on it today, because I'm just really wondering if, one, if we're showing that Tennessee Promise is going to be having rolling forward funds that exceed maybe 3 to 4 times the cost of the program, and then we're taking this and we're moving it in. I think we need a little more time, so I'm really glad we're going to have a little more time. I like these categories. I think they're right. It's just whether or not those are the right amounts. And I think by spring we'll know. We'll know better, right?
We will, and we'll also, and Jane's going to bring us an update in a moment, but we'll also have a better sense then, too, to your point, the venture funding of how the School and Student Services Division, formerly the Loan Division, I will not spoil the reveal of that name. I think I just did.
It's in this. Right?
Is it in the material? So
student schools.
Okay, good. Jane, you will still get to deliver it with a but we'll have a better sense of where that division is in terms. We'll also have a better sense too, and I'll say this on Promise. Does look great. Promise money isn't fungible. There is no way to ever put into Promise other than these kinds of funds, because we're committed to not putting in general fund dollars. So when you have a time where you can inject, I think that was F&A budget's thinking. But I think we all need to have that discussion. It did feel like premature now, but it gets everyone thinking. There's $22 million here that we need to think how we can best deploy for students.
But Tennessee Promise will have the sweep until the sweep is taken away.
That's right.
Right. So it's not that we're dealing with a defined amount when it's gone, it's gone. at least Tennessee Promise has the sweep until the sweep goes away on excess lottery funds. And so, and Mike, if you keep buying those tickets for those, $40 million deals and you wait and, it's going to, they seem to be coming around with greater frequency, don't they? The $100 million ones, but.
Understand correctly that the $1 million in operating expenses would be for a 1-year period? Is that a closeout kind of thing?
It is a closeout. There are some staff that still are working on the financials to help clean up the state books and the federal books on a load program. And then there are staff positions that are currently funded in part, at least with these funds. So yes, that would be a 1-year figure.
Allows us to transition to think through the staffing level, certainly. Also, there's still work to be done when you're closing down a portfolio that large. But there's no doubt, and it harkens back to your document you saw a moment ago. When you see our internal budget under that loans division, there is now, it's zeroed out, which is kind of odd to see. It's after years of seeing it, but it gives us a glide slope.
Okay, so we will postpone action on item 1E, and we'll move to the last decision item, and that is the audit committee appointment. Mike?
Yes. Well, two things. One, we get to welcome a new board member who, as if to serve as an illustration of the joint logo. We now have a TSAC board member who will have also served as a THEC member, Sharon Hayes, and that in and of itself is a strength. But Sharon also brings a career in higher education to the table, and in specifically higher education finance. So it feels only right that we should reward that experience with an audit committee appointment.
I am so thrilled. I'll tell you, I did serve on the audit committee when I was a member of THEC, and I've worked with several of you, including Ann, and so I know we're in good hands, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you for being willing to serve, and Mr. Chairman,
And I will say I was a former state audit, I won't say old, but a former state audit back in the day, so I think I've been on about every campus, public campus in the state, so it's an honor.
Thank you.
I think we need to do a roll call on this. So Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Dr. Adcox. Ms. Anderson. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Kraus.
Aye.
Dr. Gray. Mr. Hughes. Dr. High. Mr. MacArthur. Ms. McGinnis.
Aye.
Dr. Mazzara. Dr. Presnell.
Aye.
Mr. Turner.
Aye.
Dr. Lemming.
Aye.
Ms. Hauser.
Aye.
Mr. Smarelli. Mr. Wilson.
Aye.
Ms. Hayes.
Aye. Better make it unanimous.
Just remember, you voted for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Your audit's passed.
Chairman, just a question. I noticed on that the current TSAC members on that audit committee were Claude and Mr. Martin, and I served on that committee for the last 3 years and was just reappointed to TSAC. So I just want to make sure I fulfill my responsibilities, and I don't need another committee meeting but in my life, but I just thought I'd ask that question.
Your responsibilities have been fulfilled, and that's how we notify people they're not on committees.
Thank you. Serving, I'm thrilled that Sharon's on there. Big shoes. No.
Okay, let's move on to discussion items, and first on the list is student and school servicing update. That Jane Pennington.
Stole my thunder too.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kraus, and members of the board. It's good to be here today. And in case you haven't heard, we do have a new name. And I thank you, Mr. Kraus, for making that happen very quickly. We've been trying for some time, and we've been the loan division for how many years now? Close to 40. So that name has changed, and I'll be the worst one to use it incorrectly. So if I say loan division during this report, please ignore me. First, I want to recognize my staff, if they'll just all stand. and let you know a little bit about, very quickly, because I know I need to limit my time here. I have 38 years of experience in financial aid. Started out same place Ms. Hauser is now at Vanderbilt University a long time ago. If you add in my 2 years at the admissions office at Vanderbilt, that makes it 40. And yes, I started when I was 12. There's only one person in this room that has more experience than that, and she's also standing on my team. Ms. Sandra Rocket has 44 years at the financial aid office. Terry Parchment, who's going to be heading up our marketing team, has close to 30. Is that right, Terry? David Hutton, standing next to her, retired from MTSU a few years ago, has 38. His is both at the business office, accounting office, and financial aid office. And I'm going to leave someone out. Karen Hauser, who's sitting at the table as a board member, has 28 years. We very much welcome her. Bill Heath has 29 years. And Don Lewis, whose last name I forgot a few minutes ago, has about 17. So I was quickly trying to remember it, and luckily somebody helped me. I'm bad at remembering names. But anyway, Don has about 17 here with TSAC, correct? And he's representing our client representative group here today. We have other members. We have Sheila Sanchez standing there. I was about to leave her out, who started out back in the 80s with what was volunteer state student funding, is now Ed Financial, and has worked at the lender level. And how many years do you have altogether? 14. Then we have two guest members. We're sharing two folks from the THEC staff who are undergoing some changes similar to what we are going through, and that's Bill Crittenden and Peggy. I'm sorry. Yes, Peggy. Bill has worked at Cumberland University for a number of years, so he has great financial aid experience to help us with. And Peggy has collections experience, and she's done a great job getting in touch with some of our students borrowers who didn't want to be gotten in touch with. So she's doing a really good job. So recognize that whole group. Lori Mitchum, just recently retired from Murray State, has a number of years of experience, probably in the 30s. She's working at one of our schools. We do have two current school contracts that we're working, and David's manning or heading that up, and Bill Crittenden is helping there right now. So that's what we've been doing. So our new name is Student and School Services Division. Recently, James Snyder and I did a reconnect process or a presentation, and he had to introduce me. Well, we just changed the name. So the second day when he got up to introduce me, he got it reversed, and he said school. I'm going to embarrass you here. He said school and student services. Well, I, without thinking about it, got up and corrected him and said, we put the students first, and the crowd loved that. And so, because that is what we do, we put the students first, and in doing that, we are hopeful to help our schools out. You all know about the transition. Our portfolio has completely transitioned to ECMC. It's still very difficult for us to not call it our portfolio, but it is not our portfolio anymore. It belongs to them. In that, we have found a partnership, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the license review program, but they're helping to provide for us some programs they already had in place that will help us with reaching our schools here. So it's been in not only a transfer, which was difficult, I will admit, for a while, but I can tell you by June 30th, I was ready for it to go, and I know my staff was. It was hard moving 40 some odd years of business over to someone else, but we've done it, and we feel like that portfolio is in good hands. Our former student borrowers are in good hands, and we're very happy for that. But you'll still be hearing from ECMC because we will be partnering with them on some things throughout the state to help our students in schools. This report I handed out to you this afternoon is basically the same one that's in your booklet. I just put it in a little bit different order, and thanks to Mr. Abernathy, who's the world's best, reduce it to one page. We got it down to one page. Our number one focus will be on default management. I had to give him credit. I can take 40 pages and give it to him. By the end of the day, he has it down to one and says exactly what I said, and maybe better. So our main focus will be on default management. This is what we'll be working with our students and with our schools most closely with. This is to help them to keep those default rates down, to get them under control, and help the entire state to keep our default rate down low as it has traditionally been. It's been a challenge, but we are getting contracts. We do need contracts with the schools because we have to have access to their NSLDS processes. So we're working forward on that. Default management includes everything from financial literacy to entrance and exit counseling, to default aversion, default resolution, and just generally helping the schools with their default rate. They very much welcome this, and I think are really looking forward to working with us. The second item will be school services. We are helping with one school that David's working with right now. We're working with a program review that was the program review to meet all program reviews. And we're nearly finished, but it's been a very valuable resource for us to be able to send David in there and send other staff in as needed to get this response to the program review back to the Department of Education correctly done and reducing the costs for the school considerably. Others in school services, where we have a contract that's just gone live with a school that needs help from A to Z in their program. They've traditionally had some financial issues, so we're in there to help them utilize the financial aid for their students to the best way possible, to train them in how to do the FISAP, et cetera. So pretty much everything that's needed from in a financial aid office. The license review program, you've heard about this for several years now. You will see here in this report that it has produced an income or a recovery of defaulted student loan funds in excess of $92 million. It's been a great opportunity to get students back on the right path. And we never looked at it as a way to punish the students, to say, ha, we caught you, although there were a few who wanted to say that. We didn't. But we looked at it as a way to bring those students back in to correct repayment on their defaulted student loans, to most often rehab those loans so their credit report was cleaned up and they were able to become better users of the economy, which is always a good thing for us. The next item would be our Tennessee Reconnect. We've heard very much, especially through THEC, about the Reconnect Plus, which is reaching out to students who started school but for some reason dropped out and did not complete their program. So THEC has put forth an effort to work with the schools across the state to reach out to those students and try to get them to return to school and complete their program, which is a marvelous idea. The one thing is that many of those students would have borrowed when they were in school before and have since maybe defaulted on those student loans. So they cannot return to school and be eligible for the federal funds or even the state funds until they have resolved that default in some way. So the staff and I are reaching out to those borrowers through the school as a representative of the school. Everything's co-branded. It's the Reconnect brand, the TSAC brand, and the school logo are on any communications that we send out. Our emails even read from the school that we're contacting the borrower on behalf of. This has also been a great challenge. We had to find new addresses. We had to learn lots about skip tracing, which we have done and done very well. And so far we've reached about 1,200 borrowers. This is an ongoing program. We won't know for sure if they've returned to school until we run some reports probably in October to get an idea, but many of them will not be able to return until the spring or maybe even the summer, because it's going to take them a while to either get the loan consolidated, rehabilitate the loan, or work out, pay it in full. So, but we're working with those. The staff is following up. We have set up a database that helps us to follow up with those borrowers. We've heard lots of good news. We had to convince people, we're not calling you to collect this loan. We're calling you to help you resolve it so you can return to school. And that's been a good approach to be able to make. Scholarships to loans, we have continued to work with that, with Tim's group on the grant side, on scholarships that require repayment either by service, of a certain number of years, depending on the amount borrowed, or if they are unable or do not complete the service, then it becomes a loan which has to be paid back. We've had a great deal of success with that. We've gotten people back into repayment and are very pleased with that approach, and I am very hopeful that Tim is also. So we have recently run those folks through the license revocation or the license review process. So we will be very shortly notifying them that you have a loan with the state of Tennessee that you're not repaying. It could affect your professional license. So we feel like we'll have even more success after that. So Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Achieves, we've reached out trying to be a part of that entire process, and staff have done a great job attending the luncheons for the Bridge program, talking with those folks that are in the Tennessee Achieves Bridge program and helping them to get their way back into school. One last thing that didn't get added on to here, I've mentioned to you before that we've always taken the approach of working with students who call us who may have never been in our portfolio. They're with somebody else's portfolio. I have had people in the legislature say, goodness, what are we going to do now that you're gone? So we have committed to those folks to continue to follow up on behalf of their constituents and their defaulted borrowers. It's often difficult, very difficult to find out where your loan is because they do get switched around, very much like ours did, our portfolio was recently. So we have contacts, we have those lines that are still tied together, and we're reaching out to help those borrowers find their loans, find out what they need to do and what the status is, and often it's their multiple loans because they borrowed from more than one entity. So we have that commitment to continue doing that as long as possible. And that's my report. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Jane?
I think it's fair that in spring we would be able to bring a really good picture of how the division has evolved, and we look forward to doing it. But it's been an incredible effort by the staff to make that unit into something new. And if you read that last line of the materials, it's true. As they have gotten out into the field, the need has emerged and I think become even more defined. So we look forward to bringing an update in spring.
All right, Tim, you're back up. Grant and scholarship programs update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kraus, members of the board. Under tab 2B, you'll find expenditures for the state and lottery funded programs for the past 3 years. For the 15-16 academic year, we dispersed over $320 million to about 120,000 students. That does include the Promise and TCAT Reconnect programs as well. One item of note that I would mention is the participation in the dual enrollment grant continues to increase, and we had a growth of almost 3,000 recipients and about $3 million in that program. And as a reminder, we switched the awarding schedule changed the awarding schedule for that program a couple of years ago, and we still see a continued increase in participation. That will be something that we'll continually review and look at. Mike, did you want to?
So remember, the way we used to pay dual enrollment grant was 300, 300, 300, 300. The problem with that was the community colleges mostly charged 500, which meant students that could afford $200 got to do dual enrollment, and students who couldn't didn't. So working with the governor's office, this board changed the awarding structure to provide 2 free courses to every Tennessee student. And I just want it to sink in. It's very clear. And dual enrollment has increased, and I would say it's because of that. And all the researchers in the room are starting to get itchy, but I think that it's pretty clear there's some relationship here that when we changed every student to get 2 free courses, 3,000 more students took dual enrollment. I also say that is an example of a decision this board made that was not incredibly popular, because the reality is a whole lot of students taking dual enrollment before now feel as if their last 2 courses they're getting less money for, and that made them unhappy, and we heard from some of those people. I think it just illustrates sometimes this board will have to make decisions that aren't incredibly popular but are very worthwhile for the state. And so for those that were on the board at this time, thank you for your support of that. It has worked. And for those in the education community, especially TBR, UT, and the DOE, I hope we'll carry this message, because when we made 2 dual enrollment courses free, dual enrollment increased, and I think that's a big win for students that maybe weren't going to college and get to test college in a low-risk environment. Sorry, Tim, but...
And I will say that we'll continue to work with Emily House and her staff to study the program. I know that's been asked by the TSAC board before, so we've done that in the past, and we'll continue to do that as well. So, for the state grant and scholarship programs, we paid just over $82 million to about 46,000 students. At your seat, you should have a profile of the TSA recipients for the 15-16 year. We talked about this earlier, but the highlight is the 30% increase in recipients in dollars that we paid for the TSA program from the 14-15 year to the 15-16 academic year. A couple of other notes, we dispersed funds to the community colleges for the Community College Reconnect Grant this fall. As you may recall, the rules for the Community College Reconnect Grant were approved by the TSAC board in April, and that program started this fall semester, so the institutions have their funds and are making awards to independent students. We'll get an update on the progress of that grant and the expenditures and recipients probably sometime in October or November, somewhere around in there as well. And I do want to say thanks to Jane and her staff for the collection efforts for our loan forgiveness programs. That's been a bonus for us as well. Also, you all heard from James Snyder earlier, but James, and I want to say thanks to Robert Biggers and Leah Lou Allen. I lean heavily on those three for information to provide to you, and they do a great job administering their programs, so appreciate all their efforts. Answer any questions?
Just an observation. I think, and I just think it's important for the board just to be aware of some of the impact of decisions that we've made. And this is the first time that we have a glimpse of what the changes in the lottery scholarship does in terms of the impact on institutions. So just to kind of refresh your memory, the decision was made at the community colleges to move the traditional Hope from $2,000 to $3,000. So it used to be $2,000 for an academic cycle, and they moved it up to $3,000. At the four-year institutions, it was a reduction of $500 during that freshman and sophomore year. And so I think what we see here is just in the implementation of it, it's starting to show how that plays out. The number of students appears to be relatively constant on the traditional Hope for the four-year institutions among the privates and the TBR and the UT system. But there is a reduction, obviously, in the amount of money that's awarded to those students. And so, for instance, among the independent four-year, reduction of about $1.5 million, about $3 million less for UT, and about $4 million less for the Board of Regents four-year institutions. But then there was a net gain of $10.2 million for the community colleges there. So, which is by design. All this is by design. So if you couple the $13.8 million increase for Tennessee Promise to the community colleges, which is it's 13.2 or 13.8 rather, plus the 10.2 on the Hope, then it's a pretty significant. It's $24 million increase to the community colleges, students going to the community colleges. So, and it's just an observation, that we knew this was going to, take place, but I just think we need to realize that shift in those funds, the reallocation and redistribution of those funds took place based on that decision. So I think we just need to watch that over time. And we talked about adult students. I think we need to really pay attention to adults. But maybe another area are those successful Tennessee Promise students moving from a free environment to a much higher cost environment, whether it's MTSU or it's, King University or it's UT Knoxville, that we may need to be thinking about transition aid there. I think it's going to be really hard for them to do it. Now, granted, they should be able to save some money, but I hate to say it, although the financial literacy piece may be helpful, they tend to not think about that. They just tend to think about, this is great, and then all of a sudden I transfer to MTSU and this ain't so great no more. And So anyway, I think we just, those are all things in that conversational mix, I think, so, yeah. Just,
Questions for Tim?
I'm going to submit some institutional name corrections for you, Tim, on the report, so.
Oh, okay.
Some institutions, you move to university, which I'm sure they'd be grateful for, but they're not, and some are still colleges that are universities. I'll give you that a little bit later. You bet. I'm glad to see I'm not the only one who does that with my own members. I mean, it's really bad.
Okay, next we have Communication Services Update. Diane Lejean.
Chairman, Mr. Kraus, and members of the board. I will be providing an update on the Communication Services Division, and you can find that in Section 2C. The update starts, as always, with a list of the types of presentations that our outreach team makes across the state each year. And that we do every single one of those, typically in different seasons. In the fall, it's the presentations and the college fairs. The spring, we spend time at the middle schools. But there's a list there, especially for those of you who are new. Below that, the snapshot provides the total number of individuals that are impacted by our outreach team. I've broken it down into categories and included annual comparisons from previous years. At your seat there, I've also provided a profile that we bring together, and we include measurable metrics from 3 of our departments, and I've given you a copy there, and that's just something. It's at your seat. That's something that we do every year, but it's time to make sure that you guys have that. If you'll note there on the snapshot, the Tennessee Promise application workshops are our newest outreach program that we've begun. And last year we tripled the number that we had done from the previous year, and we're hoping to see that same kind of success for this next year. On the next page, just another breakdown of the same data, but it gives you an idea if we're at the Boys and Girls Club or working with adult learners or at the middle schools. It's a different picture of the same data. Our call center stats, there in the middle, it provides a picture of the volume of calls, live chat conversations, and emails that we receive annually. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the FAFSA frenzy. It was mentioned earlier, and I spoke with you last board meeting about this. We've renamed our FAFSA nights, and we call them now FAFSA frenzy events. And we are doing these events in conjunction with TSAC, the Department of Ed, as well as the partnering organizations for the first time this year. And we're doing this in order to try and reach a greater number of students and increase the FAFSA completion numbers for the state. I provided at your seat an infographic that Kate Derrick put together that shows all of the current information as it relates to the FAFSA completion for Tennessee, and it looks like this version. It's very cool information, talks about the counties that are doing the best job, and so this is material that we have prepared to present to the legislators. As we begin the FAFSA frenzy, which starts October 1st, that is a Saturday, we have Scholarship Saturday this weekend. It's going to be at all 13 of the community colleges and at the TCATs. Our call center will be open from 9 to 1 to take calls from students who may need to reset their logins or their passwords so they can get in to this TSAC student portal to fill out their Tennessee Promise application. Again, that deadline is November 1st. The FAFSA Frenzy events are going to run from October 1st through January 17th of next year. And just to give you an idea of the volume, we have 58, just our organization, not all the other ones that are going on. We have 58 next week, and we're going to be doing that all the rest of the fall. At the bottom, we have 2 new starts, is what we're calling it, for our department. The first is that we're working in collaboration with THEC to start an online video channel and create content, financial aid content with recorded webinars and other training type videos to educate the high school counselors, but also provide information to the parents and students. So we're going to kind of take our online presence to the next level. Another new opportunity that we're pursuing is to speak to the undergrad and graduate classes at the collegiate level, to these candidates who are preparing to be high school counselors. There really isn't a financial aid component right now in the degree programs, and so when a financial aid, a person graduates and becomes a financial high school counselor, they don't have that financial aid piece. So we'd like to provide that for them, and we started at MTSU this year as the first school. At the top of the next page, you will see I've included a map of the outreach folks. In case you have any questions, just let me know. We have 7 representatives based in those regions that handle all of the outreach activity. And I've also given you the links to the social media that we currently participate in. And then lastly, at the bottom, I provided, and I provided these at your seat as well, the new TSAC brochure. We do this every year. It comes out in September. And a brand new piece that we've not had before, and it's hot off the press, and it's come as a result of our working together with ECMC. But this is a piece that they provide to us. They've given us 80,000 copies, and we will be taking these to the high school students at the FAFSA Frenzy events during the fall. So that concludes my update on the outreach activities, the call center activities. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. We have one more discussion item. That's the audit update, and I believe Mike is going to take that one.
We are invoking the rarely used birthday privilege today for the TSAC Board of Directors. Because it is Ann Colette's birthday, the one thing she told me she wanted was for me to deliver her update. The update is located in your book. If you have questions, Ann is always happy to provide updates. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And yes. And with the chairman's permission, we'll move right into our last item in other business. And that's simply, please, behind tab 3A of your binder, before you leave here, complete this conflict of interest form and affix your signature and provide it to Pete, please. This helps us ensure we have everything we need to pass our audits, and also allows you to declare any possible conflicts of interest.
Okay, any final comments or questions? All right, there being no other business, without objections, well, first let me just say thank you to all of you for taking the time to be here this afternoon, and without objection, we stand adjourned.
Mike, do you have sign minutes for me to sign?
Erlane probably has it in the
Okay, all right.